The University College of the University of Maine System, together with the Maine Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Standards, has formed a partnership to make public information more accessible to Maine's employers. Mark Dawson continues in this section called Scope.
It is also important to know that certain reporting requirements must be met, whether or not an employer is exempt from OSHA record keeping. Every company must comply with chapters of the 1904 standard that require reporting of fatalities and that require reporting illness and injury information when asked by certain data collection programs. Specifically, there are 2 surveys that require employers to report certain injury, illness cases and related information to OSHA or to the Bureau of Labor Standards. If surveyed, employers must complete and submit them regardless of their OSHA record-keeping status. Again, later in this section, Steve gets into the details and nuts and bolts of record-keeping and reporting requirements. I want to also talk about a few exceptions or exemptions to record keeping. Everyone must keep OSHA records unless they have some sort of exemption, and there are 2 basic exemptions, the size exemption and an industry exemption. If your company had 10 or fewer employees at all times during the last calendar year, you do not ordinarily need to keep records. Similarly, that size exemption is based on the number of employees in the entire company, not just in Maine. And if you'll notice, we use that word ordinarily because a company with 10 or fewer employees will ordinarily not have to keep records unless it receives a notice from the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics that it needs to maintain records for a particular calendar year. Also, please note that the size exemption is based on the number of employees in the company as a whole, not just those that are in Maine. In determining how many employees are at a company or agency, it must count all of the employees, part-time, full-time, seasonal. Temporary employees count too for your OSHA record-keeping purposes, if you supervise their day-to-day activities. However, any recordable injuries or illnesses that you log for temps must also not be logged by the temp agency's log. Similarly, for the public sector, you are supposed to include paid, unpaid, volunteers, elected, appointed, aspire, and other officials and workfare employees. Go ahead, Kate.
If a contractor or someone who works for a contractor gets injured at my job site, should they be recorded even though they are there temporarily?
No, truly independent contractors are not considered employees of the hiring firm. They're subject to their own record-keeping rules. Under the industry exemption, section 1904.2, your work establishment's standard industrial code determines whether you must keep the OSHA forms. And those codes can be found in Appendix A to Subpart B of 1904. Standard industrial codes are assigned by the Department of Labor, and the descriptions can be found in the Standard Industrial Code Manual, which is available at the website www.osha.gov. You will also find a complete list of the industry standard industrial codes that must meet recording requirements in the document entitled Complete List of Standard Industrial Codes Subject to 1904 OSHA Record-Keeping Rules for the private sector. For the public sector, there are no industry exemptions. There are many employers in Maine and elsewhere that we refer to as multiple business establishments. Those are places where there are more than one establishment that the company does business at. And it's important to note that each employer must keep separate forms for each establishment that is expected to be in operation for a year or more. When there are multiple establishments, some may be exempt from record-keeping rules, and also it's possible to have multiple establishments in one building. For example, in the public sector, you often have like a town hall building that includes town administration, police, fire, public works, and so forth. Each department should have a separate set of records. Those forms do not need to be stored in the location of each department or of each building. They can be stored in a centralized location, but there has to be a record for each establishment. For locations that are expected to be in operation less than a year, they can be combined on one OSHA log entitled Non-Fixed Establishments. Each injury or illness case must be linked to an establishment for record-keeping purposes. Linked means that the injury must be recorded on one log only, the location where the injury or illness occurred. For example, if you have an employee who ordinarily works at one of your business locations, call it Site A, and is injured at another business location, call it Site B, you would record this injury in the log for Site B. No, sure, Kate.
If a person is injured while working for me at a site that my company does not own, does my company record the case on our log, or does the company or person who actually owns that site record it on their log?
That's a good question. If the site where the incident occurred is not on your own property, you would record the case on the log for the site where the employee ordinarily reports at the beginning of the day. If, for example, you have employees who are on the road, such as traveling salespeople or home health care aides or workers, delivery truck drivers, and so on, and they're not working at your business location, then their cases are linked to the location where they report to at the beginning of the day. Well, I want to thank you all for your careful attention and your insightful questions. And Steve Laundrie is going to be giving the rest of the sections. So this ends my part of this class. So it's been a very, very great pleasure to be here.